Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I know this is definitely a different kind of post than what you're probably used to from me, as I play a lot of standard and especially best of one standard on Arena. But today I want to actually build a commander deck. This is kind of out of the realm of what's going to be the norm of the channel. I'm not going to do this very often probably, unless obviously it skyrockets and takes off for some reason, or people just enjoy it. But primarily the channel is obviously still going to be standard best of one for the most part. Probably going to work in some best of three at some point. I just need to work out a schedule. I've just not done it for some reason because I don't know. I just keep pushing it back. Every time I think about it, stress just happens, right? But with that, we're going to talk about how to build this, and I've already went ahead and did a couple of things because I didn't want to spend all day kind of doing all the lands that I wanted to do. But I will say in the considering category that we will get to right away is Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. Whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut the Molten Pinnacle deal 3 damage to any target. So all that basically means if you have Valakut in play, and let's just make it simple, let's say we have 5 basic mountains in play as well, so we have 6 mana. We just play a 6th basic mountain. Valakut will then trigger and deal 3 damage. However, we can shortcut this if we have a card like Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which will be a card I guess I will be just adding because we want to play it in this deck anyway. Dryad of the Elysian Grove is one of the creatures. This says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. The lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types, so that would give every single land the mountain clause. So how you cheat that is you basically turn Valakut into a mountain itself. As you can see, it's just a normal land, whereas a basic mountain here specifies as basic land mountain, and even like a Sacred Foundry has the land mountain on it, so those count. Valakut does not, but with Dryad you can turn it into a mountain, and then it will be 1 land shorter that you need, and then it also turns cards like your fetch lands into mountains as well even before, so you can play this, shoot your opponent for 3, crack it, and then go get another land, which would then shoot your opponent for 3. If we have a Vesuva copying it, is kind of going to go ahead of that. However, with all that said, that's not in the deck. It's in the considering pile because the mana base is going to be a lot harder if that's what we do. So for now, we are playing one game changer, and that is Field of the Dead. I didn't even talk about what Toph does, so we'll get to that. Let's just get to that right now. Toph the First Metalbender is a deck we're building around. I just kind of said it because at the locals, everybody knows what this card does because it's a really cool card, and a lot of people have talked about how they like the card. So I just said it, assuming everybody knew what it did. But non-token artifacts you control are lands in addition to their other types at the beginning of your end-step Earthbend 2. So we just basically turn all of our lands into creatures, and then our artifacts all become lands. So the thing we're trying to do, or at least I'm trying to do, is play a lot of valuable artifacts, turn them into lands, Earthbend them, and then pop them, and then bring them back so we can get a lot of value. Whenever I say pop it, that means like sacrifice it, destroy it, swing it into a board that is going to end up getting blocked, things like that. So we end up popping it, I guess, is my kind of terminology for that. So then the artifact will re-enter, and hopefully those artifacts have ETBs and things like that. But weirdly enough, this works as a protection spell as well, because a lot of removal and a lot of things that are like destroy all non-land permanents, well, all the artifacts would be considered a land now, and then Toph would be removed, and then it would become not a land. But we have ways to turn Toph also into a land, and we'll get to that in a bit. I don't have it in here either. And then we added every Toph. Obviously, Toph Earthbending Master is really sweet. Lands you control enter, we get an experience counter, and then whenever it attacks, we Earthbend X, where X is the number of experience counters we have. So we can either grow one creature larger because you can Earthbend the same land that's already been Earthbended, or artifact in this case. But we'll just keep it simple there. And then we play Toph's Greatest Earthbender because Earthbend X, it'll be for 4 because she's obviously not our commander. So it makes it a bit weird. But land creatures you control have double strike. That's obviously really awesome. And then we have Toph Hard-Headed Teacher. This is a bit different because it cares about instants and sorceries, and I don't really know how many of those we'll really be playing. Obviously, we'll be playing some, but ones that we want to be overvaluing to come back, maybe like protection spells, something. Obviously, I'm not going to play Teferi's Protection I don't want to play too many game changers. We keep it a bit calmer wherever I play. But I do want to play this. I do think it's good enough because the bottom part says any spell you get to Earth in 1, so you can kind of overload a creature and get very, very good value. Toph the Blind Bandit is probably the weakest. It weirdly goes down, although I do think the greatest Earthbender is actually kind of better than this Toph, just because it does give our lands double strike, which is nice, so it doesn't have to be in play for a while to get valuable, and if we don't have another way to gain experience counters, we don't have to like build that up. This just kind of has impact immediately. And then Toph the Blind Bandit is whenever it enters Earthbend 2, nice. Whenever our Toph's power is equal to the number of 1/1 counters on lands you control. So it can swing for a lot, but it doesn't have trample, and it also has a small amount of toughness. So about anything relevant, especially playing about 3 or 4s, most of the time we settle on like 3.5s is really where we kind of toe the line. About 3 game changers is all we'll really ever play, and most of the time they kind of need to be thematic before we generally throw them into the deck, because if you have an art that matches your whole deck, most of the time people just don't care. It's just the group I play with, and that's just how it ends up working. But these cards are all cool. So other than that, we've added our Dryad. We put all the lands in. We're playing Field of the Dead. This is a game changer because it says whenever another land enters the battlefield under your control, if you have 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie. It's so cool in this deck particularly because let's say Soul Ring, which obviously I guess every deck apparently has to have one of these, even though I'm not the biggest Soul Ring fan of it. It just warps games in my opinion. Arcane. Oh boy. Arcane. My keyboard's really far away from like kind of how I sit because of how I like play games that I play. But obviously we have these, but so if we play a Soul Ring and we already have all the lands in, it'll actually trigger Field of the Dead because it'll be considered a land by Toph. So when we play it, it'll trigger this, which is really cool, and I would just want to abuse that a little bit. I think it's fun, so I'm going to do it. Other than that, I hope he's watching, but this is for Dan. Dan will know it. He'll see. But this is for Dan. I want to attack him with this, put 1 infect on him, and just make him sweat it out. I'm doing this as a vendetta to one of the players. I want to swing this at them, but it's also really cool in this deck because you can Earthbend it and then attack with it, and then you always have the threat to activate it, which will actually grow it even more because it'll give that base power 1, and then the counters will kind of apply to it, and then it randomly has infects. So this can be a one-shot, kind of weirdly protected creature land that you can do stuff with. This is one of the cards that work very well with this Toph, for example. So say for whatever reason we have experience at 9, we attack, or we crew up this Ink Moth, or we activate this Ink Moth, we attack with it along with Toph, and then we can Earthbend this for 9, which would be a little crazy, and then be able to one-shot players because Infect, even in Commander, only has to go to 10, which feels a little weird. I feel like we should always move that to like 15 at least. Our starting life total goes from 10 to 40 or 20 to 40. I feel like a time and like normal time and a half would be fine. Going to 15 infect, I feel like 10 is kind of crazy, but I'm not on the committee. Inventor's Fair, so we can tutor, and then just kind of value cards, shifting woodland to be able to copy stuff out of the graveyard, which I think is cool. And then some of the sweeter things we get to do, Urborg, for whatever reason, doesn't count as a black source because it doesn't have a symbol anywhere, as you can see on the card. So you're allowed to play this in literally any deck that you want. Normally, I would never recommend doing it, but the fact that Toph doesn't give our artifacts mana abilities, it literally says on the card, they don't gain the ability to tap for mana. If we play a card like Yavimaya kind of gives them that ability, so then we can tap it for a swamp, which is nice because it turns that artifact into a swamp as well instead of just a land, and same with Yavimaya, of course. And we have a couple of other creatures that'll be able to kind of do the same and abuse it, which is really nice. And then the final land that I think is super sweet is like Lotus Field here, because Lotus Field typically you have to blow up your actual lands, but if we play a card, what is the card's name? I can never remember. It is Ichor Wellsprings, I think. Card I'm wanting. Yeah, I have some cards over here on the side that I pulled up so we can kind of go through them one at a time. But this is a card that gets a lot of value when it comes to something like that. We play it. If Toph's in play, now this is considered a land. So if we play a card like Lotus Field, where did you go? This says whenever it enters battlefield tapped, whenever Lotus Field enters the battlefield, sacrifice 2 lands. So Ichor Wellspring says whenever it enters or is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. So we make our Lotus Field actually a draw spell while also being a good value piece. But I'm going to talk about a combo, weirdly enough. Also, I want to do this before we get a little too far. If you don't know how to do that in advance, we just do mana value and then mana cost, and that is how it will be sorted. So you can kind of see the curve as we go through the deck. As you can see, we're already pretty high on expensive creatures, and we don't really want to overload on the 4 mana slot unless it's worth it, because we always want to cast our commander on 4. But considering Toph's Greatest Earthbender could be a commander, and it's really, really solid, don't really feel too bad about it. And same with this, but also the same here. So feels on theme to cast any Toph at 4. Sometimes it might be better to actually cast one of these instead of our main one. Just not really sure depending on the board. But I'm going to go grab Boomy Unleashed. So I kind of learned about this yesterday when I was at the card shop. When I picked this up, and I picked up, what was the card? Oh, it was just Toph. Whenever this enters, you Earthbend 4. Great. Thematic part of the deck. Sure, we'll play it. It's 5/4. It has trample, and then it has a really good bottom ability. This also helps the other ones. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, untap all lands you control after this phase. There's an additional combat phase. Only land creatures can attack during this combat phase. So this also untaps all of our artifacts and things like that. So if we're short on casting big splashy spells, this can kind of help us get there. But with that card, if I'm not mistaken, Liquid Metal? What is that card called? Oh. I had it on my list. I thought I was going to spell it. It's not, it doesn't actually say liquid. Liquid Metal Coating. This card is really sweet. Let me switch to printing here. So, they're kind of all hard to look at, to be honest. Whatever. But this card has a sweet ability that target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. And why does that matter? Toph makes all artifacts lands, right? This can make any permanent an artifact, which by proxy is making it a land if Toph is in play. Boomy says whenever Boomy deals combat damage to a player, untap all lands you control. If we liquid metal coating Boomy, turning it into an artifact, it will then be a land, which will then apply his clause to himself, right? So untap all lands you control after this phase in additional combat phase. Only land creatures can attack during that combat phase. This would then effectively be a artifact, a land, and a creature that untaps and can attack. It doesn't specify this only has to be once a turn, so we can do this over and over again and actually get infinite combats with this, which is really cool. But Liquid Metal Coating is that kind of weird card that I was talking about earlier. They can give something like Toph that artifact ability, so we can Earthbend it. Therefore, if it ever gets popped, because again, we can make it a land because of its own clause, and then on its end step, it can Earthbend itself to make it get a bit bigger, and then whenever it dies or exiles, it'll actually return back to play, so we don't have to play our commander again, kind of avoid that commander cost, which is really nice. The Liquid Metal Coating just helps us out in a lot of weird different ways, and we like that, obviously. So a couple of cards to put in here if we're going to be returning things back is Amulet. I'm not going to be doing any crazy combos with this card. I just want it literally for the untap. Unfortunately, Modern the Horizon Gathering has made this card cost $51. According to this, I think it's a little bit less than that. This is obviously as high as you can go. As you can see around here, you can sell it Card Kingdom for 32 if you want to buy it for 70. So that's pretty cool. A lot higher than this, but you know, it is what it is. You got to buy from individual sellers if you go elsewhere. Guard Kingdom is a pretty well reputable store, so obviously you got to take that with what you will. And then there's another one. I cannot remember that creature's name. I actually have to do some research here. The permanent enters tapped. We need to go to Rifle. I literally don't know what my search said, so I don't know. You guys can find out something about me probably. Advanced. Sorry for the flashbang if that's going to bother you. That's not on me. So Amulet says whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped under your control, untap it. Enters tap, untap it is probably what we want to do. We don't want to type enters tapped, untap it. Then we can sort this by mana value. Maybe this will get me there. It is colorless and is 2 mana, so where are you? Maybe I'm wrong. It has this clause, I thought. Well, I'm going to move on. Hopefully I remember what it's called, because that is a very sweet card that I want to put in here because it untaps. It's 2 mana, I think. And then it has whatever. We're moving on. I'm not going to dwell on it for too long. We were going to play Amulet and then one other card. Oh my, I literally thought of it. Tiller? That Hold up. Yeah, I was right. Oh, did I not put a second L when I typed it? I guess not. Whole keyboard being far away from me is costing. But Tiller Engine. Whenever a land enters the battlefield tapped and under your control, choose one. Untap that land. Tap target non-land permanent opponent controls. So this card can either tap stuff down, so that helps us a lot when we're playing our artifacts because it will be lands, right? If they enter tapped, that's even better. But Tiller Engine can help us in a way where if our lands get popped or blow up or whatever, and they come back or be earthbended, they'll enter, and then we can either untap them, or if our opponent does something during combat, say they Doomblade something, that's a notorious card. They Doomblade a land or whatever, and then it comes back, it enters, we can untap it, or we can use that kind of ETB trigger off Tiller Engine to then tap their blocker if they kind of mess that up a little bit. So that is pretty cool as well. But let's get some cards in here, yeah? So a card that seems pretty obvious. We're playing Earthbending stuff. Let's grab Earthbender's Ascension. Card is sweet. Does have to get a forest, I believe, a basic land card, maybe not a basic forest. As you can see, where you do play 3 of each in a weird way because of Field of the Dead, you have to do it a bit weirder. We do have 2 forests, 2 mountains, 2 plains, and then when we have the snow coverage because these do count as basic lands, as you can see the basic land type, but they do have a different name. So for something like Field of the Dead, that works, which is always nice. If we're going to do that, this enters landfall. We can give things extra counters and trample. And then we want to add another very obvious card. Everybody knows this from Standard. Old Badger Mole Cub, the absolute phenom himself. This is a bonkers card for every reason you could ever think of. And a card that works like Dryad does, and that is this card from Standard as well. I did all this so ahead of time to be prepared, and then I ended up not being prepared, which is crazy. But Great Divide Guide, each land and ally you control has tap add a mana of any color. So once we turn all of our artifacts into lands, if we have a Great Divide in play, we can tap all those for any color that we need. And all the Tophs just happen to be allies as well, because that's just how they did the set. I don't know what to tell you, and Boomy is as well. So it actually gets a lot of value in a deck like this. So that's cool. The other card I wanted to put in, although this card has the kind of, I will cut this card later probably. It kind of just depends how it performs or how well we can get to this mana cost. During your turn, Avatar Kyoshi has hexproof. At the beginning of your turn, Erp an 8, then untap that land. That is pretty sweet. That allows us to kind of go to combat with it. It doesn't have the weird clauses these do that they're attacking or in step. It says at the beginning of combat we Erp an 8. That's a big creature that also comes back and Avatar Kyoshi. So for 8 mana, we play this, we untap that land because she does that, and then we get a lot of power, 14 to be exact, but there's a lot of other things that could happen in Commander that makes it more, hardened scales, things like that as well. So obviously, we're looking pretty good there. Okay, so with that, you wouldn't know, but I had to take a break for a second. I realized I'd just been talking for 20 minutes solid. My mouth was getting really dry, so I had to like pause the video and actually take a second. And also kind of line up my other cards I want. There is a card that I probably should play, but honestly, I will probably just not be buying because this is an uncommon printed nowhere ever. It said, I don't even know where you can get this card. This card is unfindable for some reason. It is a uncommon and it's super expensive. So I'm just going to move it to kind of considering. I would play it because this one is cheaper than Toph in terms of mana cost, so it does fit into that clause of like it's not competing to be cast with Toph, so we'll move it to considering. I will play it if I ever find one for a reasonable price, but I will just be moving on that. A card that I've also acquired already is Sylvan Safekeeper. A lot of the cards that you're seeing that I'm putting in is cards that I know I have in my collection or cards that I know are at the shop and will be putting in my deck almost immediately. Sylvan Safekeeper is one of those. So sacrifice the land, target creature you control gains Shroud until end of turn. That obviously works with Toph pretty well. We can sack any of those artifacts. Again, this all kind of comes back to Ichor Wellsprings as a card where we can always sacrifice this and then give a card protection and then also get rewarded with that by drawing a card. So that always feels really, really nice there. But other than that, I can't figure out if I want to play cards like Lotus Cobra and things like that, because with artifacts coming in as lands, if they can tap for mana, at some point, how much mana do you need before it's kind of redundant and too much? Like, you have to actually play some win conditions at least. But a card that I feel like goes in here, no question, is Tireless Provisioner. This is a card that is wacky. This kind of has that Displacer Kitten vibe to it, where it can be very absurd very, very quickly. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, create a food token or a treasure token. So we don't even have to use the mana side. We can actually make foods with them. So we can use them as mana rocks, and then if we need life later in the game, we can crack those foods and then gain that life, right? So weirdly enough, not just using this for treasures, unless you're in, I guess, like the Squirrel Sack deck or something like that. So Tyler's Provisioner is obviously a really good, strong, valuable card in the deck. I guess a couple of other cards, we can grab a few removal slates in here. It's kind of like... as I'm typing and trying to talk at the same time, that's really hard. Swords to Plowshares. So this is a card, obviously it's a super staple in the format. Kind of always going to play this card, kind of like Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. Unfortunately, it is a auto occlude most of the time, but we're also going to put in like the mana accelerants, for example. So like 3 visits, the card that we're going to automatically include. Ooh. I've not been much of a Doctor Who guy. I've seen, like, as most people have probably seen in a lot of places, like talk or YouTube shorts and stuff of it, and I've felt like it's really cool. I just haven't really sat down to watch it to make sure I would enjoy it. I probably would enjoy it, but I just haven't done it. So obviously going to grab Farseek. We're going to grab 3 visits. And the best part about these is they just say forest, so we're not really getting taxed for not playing too many basics. We do play a good chunk, but not so many that we feel comfortable enough to overload on that. And then we're obviously going to grab a couple more cards like Nature's Lore. Seems like a good one for us to slam in here. So far, they kind of all do the same. We want to get a Plains Island, whatever, or a forest card, or a forest card. We're mainly going to be green, red for the most part, splashing white, probably for removal sleeves, or like a card that has a good ETB, for example, like Boomy, playing something. I don't know if I will be, but I just thought about it. Playing something like an Ephemerate might even be sweet, where we can exile target creature control and then return it to the battlefield. So we can use this as a protection spell, but for a card like this, whenever it enters, we Earthbend 4 with no other claws. We can then bring up 2 lands for 1 mana, which is always really nice, or flickering this to grab a different card out of our graveyard. Same with maybe a couple of other creatures whenever we play them, if we put them in the deck, obviously. So this is kind of on the chop block right now, but I definitely could see it being super valuable. And then with that, we want to play probably Dama's Reach, and then maybe Cultivate, or a Sky Shroud Claim. Oh, okay. I didn't realize to put 2 S's. Then a Sky Shroud Claim. Search library, 2 forest cards, put them on the battlefield. We do have to be a little careful because these can get a bit redundant. So I'm just kind of putting in a lot more now than I probably will play in the end. Again, the deck list will be there for you to kind of fact check me. Maybe I get lazy and do nothing. So a card to kind of combo with the Valakut we talked about in the beginning is one of my favorite cards of all time, and that's Scape Shift. I'm going to move this to considering right now because obviously we're not really playing any type of wombo combo type stuff. So Scape Shift is sweet. Sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for that many lands, put them onto the battlefield, and then whatever. Works really cool if you do have a card like Amulet in play, because this untaps everything, or Tiller Engine. You can use Scape Shift to kind of tap all of your opponent's stuff so you can go to lethal. But is it the greatest? I have no idea. So we'll just have to see, right? We don't know. We don't know. A card I do want to play, though, because it is one of my favorite cards. I love playing Green Sun Zenith, and so far, every creature we put in the deck is green. Right now, in between the recording of what I did before and now, I've pulled up like EDH Rec on the side. As you can see, I also have other decks here, but I didn't want it to be too confusing going in and out. This is a little too strong for my taste. I don't really want to go this crazy with it, but this is also kind of a good calling card of what we want to be looking at doing, kind of seeing like, oh, how many ramp spells do they truly play? And as you can see, Nature's Lore, 3 visits, Valakut's Recovery. I actually picked up one of these yesterday to put in a deck. I already forgot about it. So Valakut's Recovery is going in. 1, it's a land, and it can also buy our cards back. Or if it's last playing, I'm just going to close that. I was like, what is that? And then I pulled it back open. I was like, wait a minute. But, Forest Charm is kind of another one that's cool. Permanency control, gain indestructible until end turn. I feel a little weird about this one because the idea of Earthbending is to kind of not have to worry about that, right? Is like they blow up, they come back, we do things with them. But where it really gets in trouble is like Earthbending Wintermoon's Orb and then being able to tap it for mana and not have a card like Urza needing to be required to play this is disgusting. And I'm very upset if that happens to me for sure. But we'll go back into our deck here. We're going to play a couple of other obvious cards and probably like a Lightning Greaves. I do think this card is just one of those cards that most people will be playing anyway. People love giving their commander haste, me included, even though this one doesn't technically need it to be super value. This is actually more of just say get it on the board piece and protect it, but not like make people forget it's there by doing a lot of other stuff, right? So that's really nice. But the reason Greaves is so cool in a deck like this, we can protect our stuff by equipping it to something, and then we can tap it for mana. And that's cool. Like tapping our artifacts that are typically one noted and only have one goal. It's really nice when we can get value like that and be like, oh, we'll just tap it for mana instead, and that's perfectly cool. Like, that's fine. It's awesome, right? So with that, we do need to put a couple of other cards. A card that comes to my mind is like, I've been a KCI player for a while. Every fiber of my being wants me to jam it into this deck, but I will not. I'm growing up. It'll probably end up in the deck at some point, but I'm going to pretend for now that I've grown up past playing KCI and not put it in the deck, even though I kind of want to. But it's a weird combo, and it's hard to interact with, and it's a little awkward to explain it. And I just don't like doing that, and I also don't want people to feel like I got them, because that just doesn't make like a super fun gaming experience. But what does this card say as I'm looking over here? Screen for work and enchantment. Whenever you attack a player with one or more creatures power 4 or greater, draw a card. Exhaust. Urban 4, activate only during your turn. So exhaust, the problem with that is like that's a one and done. I don't really like that too much. If it was like only do it once per turn and only during your turn, I'd feel a little bit more confident in playing this. But I feel like other than the fact that Aang cracks his hand, it's kind of a whatever card. I'm actually going to cut this for now. This could be a bad cut. Maybe somebody can explain to me why it's like incredible, because I don't know. Obviously the 4 are higher in drawing card. Maybe that's why. Just the draw. Do I have a lot of 4 power creatures? Obviously here, and that would work, but at that point that's a lot of mana. This would do it, and it Earthbend's 4, so that would do it. This would do it. This doesn't, but not to say we don't Earthbend it and grow it, especially just putting counters on things. This would most likely do it. No, 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 no. Could, because we can obviously Earthbend the same land, and obviously no. You know what? Let me just put it back in here. Just let it sit here for a minute. I will come back to this. And another thing, I personally hate playing cards like this, because I feel like they don't. When the game is gone now, the scaling, I feel like this doesn't do enough as much as something like an Innkeeper's Talent. Obviously, I don't want it to do, like, this 1 mana spell shouldn't do as much as Innkeeper's Talent, right? At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Nice. Permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. Just feels like in a deck like this, where most of my land creatures that are attacking that have been earthbended with counters on them will all have ward is good. If you were to put 1 or more counters on something, it doubles. So Hardened Scales adds an additional counter, which is nice. Innkeeper's Talent is also nice, but playing a lot of stuff like this is where your hand gets weirdly clunky if you have too many. So we do have to be aware of that, especially playing valuable artifacts like Amulet, where on its own it does literally nothing. Besides, I guess in this deck it could tap for a mana because of Toph, which is funny, so I weirdly have to think about that. But we should mainly be an artifact deck and look to add a couple pieces. Only needing like 29 more cards left is also a bit tough already. So another card I saw that I was like, this has to be in, because it weirdly does a lot more in this deck than it will in other decks, and that is Tales of Katara and Toph. Creatures you control have, when this creature becomes tapped for the first time during each of your turns, put a 1/1 counter on it. So that also counts an artifact that we've earthbended, and we tap it for mana, it would grow. Which also, I like, I'm spamming things out, but also, this works really well with Boomy, right? It is only the first time during each of your turns, but obviously we're not always going to have a liquid metal coating in play, so this isn't always going to be an artifact. But with Boomy in play, and this, we can attack, grow all those lands a bit, and then attack with them being slightly bigger, and then that might help our bitter work be nice. And it's also an additional combat phase, so something like Innkeeper's Talent will happen again, which also comes to question that Ouroboros should probably be in this Magic the Gathering deck. I don't want to play it as much as us standard players don't like seeing it. But if you know what it does, you know as much as I do that it probably deserves a spot in the list. And that is kind of upsetting. However, what else do we want to play? Do we want to play the end-all, be-all landfall evolution stage, which is really nice? I do want to put a couple 1-mana creatures in here. Something like the Lighted Halfling. It's always nice, in my opinion. I always like playing the Lighted Halfling. I will not be playing with foils if I can avoid it. And I will also not play with scrolls either. They're pretty expensive. But the Lighted Halfling's obviously always nice. A card like Esper Sentinel, a little part of me wants to play it because it does get a ton of value in a deck like this. Because it's an artifact, so Toph then makes it a land, which is weird. Did I just sell myself? This is a card like this where it's got a lot of value on it. Like it's a $47 card according to this. I personally just don't want to buy this. Obviously, there's proxying stuff like that, but working at a local game store kind of makes that conversation and vibe a little weird whenever it's like, oh, you should buy these cards. And it's like, well, but you proxy them. It's like, I don't even really care. If you want to proxy cards, but if your tournament organizer says, hey, they have to be legal, like real cards, then they have to be real, and it's just not that big of a deal. Like, it's just whatever. But other cards, for example, that I would obviously love to play in here is going to be something like a Bristly Bill. But man, I looked at the price. I looked at this down here. It's already about $1,000, and that is not very cash money. But a card I don't really like playing because the card gets out of control really quickly is like a card like Mossborn Hydra. You randomly with this card have that weird clause when you're playing with your friends that you play this on 3. It doesn't really get answered in a deck like this where maybe you get to play a Toph that turn and you have a couple of artifacts. Say maybe you have an Arcane Signet or something like an Amulet or a Wellspring or something like that. And you've already got an Urborg in play, for example, then you just start getting to do stuff with your Hydra and you play other artifacts, and now this grows really quickly, and then on the next turn you have to die roll on who you're going to swing this 16,000 powered creature at. It creates a weird vibe, and then people kind of look at it and be like, oh no. And also turns you into a target. So that's another thing to think about, is playing this will 100% get me targeted at my table, because they'll be like, I know what that does, and I'll be like, I know what it does as well. Can we both agree to not touch it? And they're like, no, I'm removing it, and I'm removing you. The best removal in Commander is player removal. I will tell you that. So we got some stuff in here. We're at 79 cards, so in theory we only need 21 more, right? I'm not stupid. Yeah. What are we going to put in? We have a lot of sorceries, maybe too many sorceries. Have a few instants, maybe not enough instants. 38 lands is a weird number, and the only reason I say that is because we have to remember that our artifacts a lot of times are going to count as lands, and we're going to play a lot of mana stuff. So I don't know how many lands we're supposed to be playing, which is going to be a weird conversation we're going to have at some point probably, but I don't know who's trying to ask me. Another good card here is going to obviously be Azula. And then we're also probably going to have to look if we want to be playing any bounce lands. I'm not really sure. Also learned just yesterday this card existed from Final Fantasy. This Azula art. So I'm going to leave it because it's pretty sweet. But another card is really nice that gets a lot of value. It's another random jumpstart card that's $1 trillion. Is going to be not a synthesizer cat. Before the cub, there was the cat. Landfall. When the land you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. If it's the second time this ability has resolved, double the number of 1/1 counters on that creature instead. So it gets a lot crazier, because if this is the second time this ability has resolved, so just on the second time, you just get to look at like an Ouroboros and be like, hey man, we put you at 1, so we put a counter on you, so you're now at 2. We cracked the fetch land and went and got another land, or we sacrificed an artifact and then it came back as an earthbending or something weird like that. Or Boroid. What if we double your counters instead? And now we got you more because now we have an Innkeeper's talent and things like that. So it gets a little crazy and out of hand pretty quickly. Another card that we could find value in playing, and it just kind of works with how crazy our commander could be, is a card like Scrap Trawler. This is that KCI card this is not KCI, but KCI plays this. Whenever a Scrap Trawler or another artifact control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Return to your hand target artifact card from your graveyard with lesser mana value. So in a situation where, in theory, let's say we have a 5/4/3 drop in terms of creatures or whatever that are artifacts, right? Somebody blows up the board. This will trigger for all of those, and then because they're all in the graveyard already, they can cascade kind of down and pick them all up and put them back in our hand. So if all of our artifacts blow up, we have a way to grab them all back, which is really nice. And obviously pretty cool. So on here, there's a like Tifa Lockhart, which I think is fun. There's also, I've not read this card, but I'm going to pull it over here because I want to be able to read it with everybody, not saying I'm playing it. I've not read Black Panther. I don't typically play 1/1 counter decks, so some of these cards I'm kind of reading, not for the first time, but for the first time that I'm considering putting it into a deck. So whenever Black Panther or another creature you control attacks, put a 1/1 counter on target land you control. Well, that seems good. Okay. Move all 1/1 counters from target land you control onto, maybe not into target creature. That would be a weird way to describe that to the class. If one or more 1/1 counters are moved this way, you gain that much life and draw a card. Update. I'm going to leave Black Panther right there. I'm going to leave him right there because he is good. Okay. I see why people play it. I see why I forget it exists immediately after my opponents get up from the table, because I don't want to know that card exists, because that card is a little bit messed up. Other than that, are we playing Traveling Chocobo? Who knows? Do I know? I don't know. Do you know? You don't know. Do we want to play the bird that caused so much drama in Final Fantasy and could make people lots of dollary dues if you pulled 1 of 77? You may look at the top card of your library anytime. I talked about putting it over here so everybody can see them. Video has no structure. Please do not be mad at me. I'm just kind of vibing, having fun. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play land cards and cast bird spells from the top of your library. If a land or a bird you control entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control, okay, we can stop reading. It doubles it. That's all we need. Where it's in there now. Yeah. Okay. So a couple of other spells we're gonna put in right away. We're gonna grab Earthshape. Grab Heroic. I forgot I didn't put this in here until I looked over and saw it. And Redirect Lightning. I don't know if I would really want to play Redirect Lightning in here, but again, it kind of fits the thematic thing. It's from Avatar, so I do want to play it. Then Heroic is from Spider-Man, the best set of all time. I left the awkward silence on purpose, just so we're all aware. Because Spider-Man was a set. And if it's your favorite, I'm happy for you. Spider-Man sucked. I'm joking. Spider-Man was cool. I like Superior Spider-Man. It's one of my favorite cards. But Earthshape. Earthbend 3. Then each creature you control with power less than or equal to the land's power gains hexproof and indestructible until end turn. You gain hexproof until end turn. So this card is a lot better than it kind of reads on paper, because normally, like, how big's that land going to be? But the fact that you can earthbend onto a land that's already earthbended, that land creature could be literally any size. So if it's Earthbended it 2 that goes to 5, and then anything creature you control with power less than that, it's just going to be good. It's going to be fine. We're going to play this. It also is not Teferi's Protection, so we would prefer to play that instead anyway. Outside of that, it's slam pickings out here, brother. We do want to play this one because it has... Searing Haze is one of those cards that is weirdly free, so if you control a commander, you can play it for free. Prevent all combat damage, or prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponent control. However, the reason this is cool is because it does actually have a Toph art to it. So, see it kind of over there. Pretty sick. Another card that I have that I probably won't play because it's more of a kind of structured modern format playable is like a force of vigor. The only reason I would really play this because it's not necessarily all that good in commander per se, unless you're kind of, it's one of those cards that the higher up you are, the little, obviously the better it is, but casual is a little bit worse. But it does have a Toph art, so I will just move it to kind of considering. Obviously, if you want to play every card that has Toph on it, then be my guest. Obviously, I get it. And then there's a couple of random ones. Cracked Earth, we can Earthbend 3, then Earthbend 3, then we gain 3 life. That's like good, but I just don't know how good. It just feels like a card that would have cut pretty quickly. But it also works with the other Toph. It's like if you were to put a counter on something, you would put an additional one if it's a lesson. So it feels like maybe that would be good. I thought about Sylvan Awakening, but I'm not sure about that because it just feels a bit weird. Do I play that? Weird because this one already makes mana. So I'm going to put this in the considering pile, but it's the Great Henge. And the Great Henge is a very good card. It costs less, equal to the power, and then we can tap it for 2 green. We gain 2 life. When a non-token creature you control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on it and then draw a card. This is a great way to draw cards. It kind of has that same clause as Bitterwork, where we're going to use it as a card draw engine. But for now, I'm going to put it in the side and just not worry about it all too much. Here's a card that also fits kind of the Hardened Scales vibe, and that's Ozolith. This is an artifact though, so we can obviously tap for mana. It does have that upside where Hardened Scales does not. If one or more 1/1 counters we put on an artifact or creature you control, then that many 1/1 counters are put on it instead, +1. And then we can just put a counter on something for 2 mana. Nice. Or we can cycle it if this card's really, really bad. So that always works out well in our favor. But other than that, do I want to play Indestructible Artifacts? Do I not want to play Indestructible Artifacts? I kind of don't want to because it's just... they're like bad otherwise. And if you get a hand that's kind of like that, it just sucks a bit. And we could put in a little bit stronger cards if we're looking at what we're doing. So let's grab Prismatic Omen. This works like Dryad. It makes our lands all types. We could grab something like a Wilderness Reclamation or a Seedborn Muse, even though Seedborn Muse is a game changer. But Wilderness Rec seems kind of cool. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Max put all untap. But at that point, like, we should play Unwinding Clock because one, it's not a game changer, right? It also untaps all of our stuff, right? Or am I faded on what Unwinding Clock does? Hello? Mr. Clock, where are you? I could type it in, but I've already started, so I don't want to do anything. Untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap. So, okay. I mean, fair enough. But I don't think I want to play it, to be honest. Some of my choices are just based off vibes. If the vibe test isn't passing, I'm just not playing it. That's okay. Do we want to play Tezzeret? Maybe? I guess I could pull this over now, but I don't really want to. So, What do we want to do from there? I guess this is also a good one. This is at the top. I know somebody that plays this as a commander, so it feels a little weird to put it in the deck, but Tanook is really cool. From Edge of Eternities, the set that will never get reprinted, apparently. Whenever a land you control enters, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. If it's the second time this ability is resolved, draw a card. So we can play a land, deal damage, crack it, draw a card. But the thing about earthbending is this can happen on our opponent's turn. If we block with the lands that are earthbended and 2 of them re-enter, then we can trigger this and draw an additional card. So that's actually really, really nice. I think Scrap Trawler is going to be cut for now. I'm just going to move it to considering. I just don't really want to play it, to be honest. Pretty sure slot's getting pretty tight in general as we're up to 24. But we can kind of come over here and evaluate where we settled, even though we did take some of these. Each player who casts an on that's a taxes kind of piece. I don't really care to play it. Voice is cool. We could play it. Earhawk is really sweet, but we're not playing Candelabra in our deck, so I don't really care to play it. And this is why I look at some of these lists to see random cards like this. Creatures enter. This creature enters with 2/1 counters on it. Whenever an opponent commits a crime, proliferate. That's pretty sick. Roaming Throne seems good, but Roaming Throne, because the standard has gone up exponentially in terms of value, so I'm just not even going to worry about playing it. Didn't realize that Boomy art existed, even though I could just click and look at other arts. Flawless Maneuver. I actually have this card. I have that exact art from when I opened a bundle, so I'm actually going to put that in. This is some of the stuff I do whenever I'm building decks, just so I'm not really missing anything very obvious. But yeah, a card like this that I own that's literally sitting in a box doing nothing, I'm going to put in the deck. Because I've been meaning to either sell it or play it. Finale is honestly a great way to end the game too. I think I do want to play Finale. I really enjoy Finale as a card. It's very like... It's very... This is the finale. You either counter this or the game's over. Like, it's your decision. You decide. Counter it or die. Up to you. But a card over here like Herd Heirloom. What does this do exactly? From Tarkir. Add mana of any color. Spend this mana only cast creature spells. But if we have Toph, we could potentially force this to tap for any color, right? Because we would add a new line of text to this card. Until end of turn, target creature you control, power 4 or greater, gains trample. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I could be convinced. Not a card I see very often, but I'm going to add it this way, apparently, because I'm stupid. You know, do a thing 100 times and then immediately forget how to do it. But yeah, something like Winter's Orb, I'm just not playing. Chromatic Lantern, the reason this is in here is not for mana fixing. It's to make sure our lands can tap for any color. And what I mean by lands, I mean our artifacts. It means like an amulet that does nothing, but with Toph in play, is now a land. Chromatic Lantern now lets that tap for any color. So it's kind of cool. I'm not sure I'm going to play that many. Again, the other thing about playing a little bit lower power is you kind of get the opposite thing where you don't necessarily have to be as fast or as like efficient in finding the kind of same cards to do the same stuff. This is diabolical, dog. This card, being an artifact centric deck and then playing this seems counterintuitive, but it's not, because this card's nuts and it's very good. If you're playing higher levels, you probably should be playing this because of how good it is. But I will not be, because it's got added to the game changers list. Remove the target attack and creature you control from combat and untap it. See, this one seems good because you can attack with a lot of stuff, and then if your opponent casts a spell to kind of blow you out, for example, Aetherize. Return all attacking creatures to opponent's hand. Well, what if we just return them all back out of combat? Because it does remove them, attacking creatures you control, from combat. So they are no longer in combat whatsoever. And then it just kind of ends that, and then the card does nothing, and we don't lose our stuff, and then they're all untapped, which is really cool. I obviously enjoy that. Also, if our lands have vigilance, or our creatures have vigilance, we can attack with them, tap them for mana. and then use this 0 mana ability and return them all back, and then cast something big if we want to. For example, figured out how to cast this at instant speed or something like that, or obviously maybe another card that is a bit better at instant speed. So other than this one, let's kind of click on some other off one. The First Metalbender, just saying it's a tier 3. Bracket 3s a lot of times actually where I like to sit, because this is where you get a lot of spicier cards because they're not wanting to put in just like every game changer on the list. So they play 20 creatures. They play the Market Walker, which is cool. Elvish Reclaimer is cool. This actually works really, really well. I just, for whatever reason, as much as I like sacking lands and going and doing stuff like this and playing Valakut, I just hate playing this card. And I don't know why. It is thematically everything I want to do. But I hate it. And I don't get it. It can be done at instant speed. That's awesome. The land, if it's earthbended, comes back. That counts our artifacts. It's so good in this deck. And I'm not going to play it. I just don't want to. This is literally better than like the Lighted Halfling and stuff. And I'm still refusing to play it. I don't know why. You should probably, I'll put it in a considering list just in case you want to play it. Because again, this card is bonkers and it is good. I don't know why. Every time I play it, it just upsets me. And I just don't really get it. When another ally you control enters Urban 1, it's a 2 mana 1/1. When another ally, so it doesn't count itself. I feel like we're already pretty high on our creatures. I don't really want to add more. Boomy, when it enters Urban 1, okay, it's 5 mana 4/4. Whenever it attacks, put 2/1 counters on each land creature you control. Oh boy, that's a $12 card for a card that requires the attack clause. That's for sure. Like this card's $5, and I think it's nuts. This card's $5 or 5. They're both 5 mana, 5 mana and $12. The Urban 1. This for 5 mana, Urban's 4 and has trample, and it's a 5/4 over this being a 4/4. So for 5 mana, we can get 9 power along with 8 toughness. And then for 5 mana, we can get 5 power and 5 toughness. And when this attacks, we put 2/1 counters on each land creature you control, but we have to wait to do that. So the 1/1 can attack, but realistically, a 1/1's not going to attack. A 4/4 becomes a lot more likely to attack because smaller value creatures will not be blocking it. And then when this attacks, it has the threat of doing additional combats. This one's $6. This one's $12. You be the judge. I don't know. I'm not talking about those ones anymore. Hour of Reckoning. Destroy all non-land permanents. Somebody needs to give this player a hug. Cue the Intwoods. Sacrifice any number of lands. Reveal the top X cards of the library where X is the number of lands sacrificed this way. Choose any number of artifacts in our land cards revealed this way. Put those cards on the battlefield. So you earthbend and then you sack them and then you reveal the top. Getting the whole hug thing, man. Like somebody, listen, bro. It's okay. You guys are cooking though. This list is crazy. Destroy target land its controller search the library for a basic land, puts it onto the battlefield tapped. This is cool because you kind of just do it to yourself a lot of times, and if your opponent plays like a very troublesome land, you can kind of do it. This is a kind of combo card. If you don't know what this card is, it has buyback, sacrifice the land. If your land's earthbended, or you have a thing every time you go to combat, you can earthbend the land. You can kind of do this infinitely with 2 mana, depending on what land it is, especially if it's something like a bounce land or something. This card's really cool. I don't know if I'm going to play it. It's kind of like that Spore Frog with Muldrotha thing where you kind of just get to do this over and over again. And honestly, sometimes in Commander, I'd rather just lose the game and re-queue up and play a new game than stall my opponent for 7 turns, praying I get out of it, and then eventually just losing anyway. and then feel like I wasted 10 to 15 minutes of our time when we could just move on. Not that that's always how it works, because obviously you play it if you want, like, winning. Playing that is a winning play. Sometimes I'd rather just lose, I guess. I don't know. Oz looks good. It's just really expensive, so feels like a card that I should at least throw over here. And the artifact pile, for whatever reason. Although, which one is this? Is this the final, not Final Fantasy. If it's the Fallout one, because that's what that looks like. I can't really tell by the art. I probably just ordered that because I got the whole Fallout kit, so that's pretty cool. This enters the battlefield, put it in the graveyard from the battlefield. You may switch diver baseline, reveal it. Okay, pretty good. Prismatic Omen, that's a card we just put in ourselves. Terra, Annie, all will be one. This card is a really cool card to play. 35 lands. See, they are about roughly what I was thinking, a bit lower on the lands. We have 5 cards to add, but I think I'm just going to call it there because it's just going to be some random 5 cards for now because I just don't know what I want to put in. Go here and just see what this player is doing. Oh, look at this guy. Flat toes and stuff. But Mother of Runes seems cool. This also seems cool. And fall enters, you may discard a card if you do draw a card, return. Cool. Interesting. Bloom Tender could be a card we could put in here. I could definitely see playing that. That would also be good. Fair enough, brother. Fair enough. Valakut Awakening would be cool. Looting, Green Suns, we have. Finale, we have. Surge, Harmonize. Now. Cool. Maybe just playing Talismans. Reverse Titan is really cool. Also, I don't know if you know how this works with Reverse Titan. Protection from mana value 3 or less. Whenever it attacks, you deal 5 damage to each opponent. If you Urpin this and it attacks, it still gets the claws even though you didn't crew it up. That tax is just on the card. It is a 10/10. Now, I don't remember if it's a 10/10 while attacking with the Earthbend onto it. I actually can't remember right now exactly how it works. So we might look to grab like a Reaver Titan at some point and put it in. Survival of the Fittest. A bit of a really good card. But with that, I think I'm going to call it there. This is where we kind of settled on. It's looking like it's about $1,300, but obviously some of these lands are specific lands, and I own quite a bit of these things already. Although I don't really like to flex that. I don't think that's like a weird thing to be like, oh, I own all this deck, so I might as well play it. But been playing for like 7-8ish years, and every time I get a fetch land, I just don't get rid of it. But something like an Urborg is pretty expensive that I don't own, so honestly I might just not even play it. So a bit pricey for where we're kind of at and what we're wanting to do, so we'll just have to kind of look at it and gather it slowly. But I hope you all enjoyed, and anything, just hanging out, maybe just have me on your other monitor for a while, at least I think for like an hour. But I don't expect this video to do all that well, to be quite honest, but it is what it is. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.